Jaguar Wright really sat down and said, yeah, I'm about to shake this whole table. And honestly, the way she started talking about Jada Pinkett Smith and Will Smith, it wasn't light tea. It was the kind that makes everyone in the room go quiet. Because the picture she painted, messy, layered, and honestly kind of sad if you really listen to it. So listen, we all know Will and Jada have always been different. That whole red table talk energy, the oversharing, the we're healing publicly vibe. But Jaguar is basically saying what a lot of people have been thinking for years, but never fully said out loud, that this marriage, it's not what it looks like. And maybe it never really was. And it starts with something that keeps coming back again and again, Tupac Shakur, because Jada has never let that story go, like ever. We're talking almost 30 years later, and she's still bringing him up in interviews, still calling him the love of her life, still comparing him to Will in ways that don't even feel subtle anymore. And it's like, girl, your husband is sitting right there. She even admitted straight up that she never wanted to marry Will in the first place. Imagine hearing that as a husband. She said her mom pushed her into it, that Will wanted a family, and she just kind of went along with it. And from that moment, people started looking at the relationship sideways because it didn't sound like a love story. It sounded like a decision. Now add in the Tupac stuff, the stories about him proposing, the way she talks about him, like he's still this perfect figure. And it starts to feel like Will has always been competing with a ghost. And not just any ghost, but one she refuses to let go of. And then Jaguar goes even further. She starts bringing up rumors that have been floating around for years, like Jada allegedly stepping out with Mark Anthony back when they were working together. Now officially, everyone denied it. But the timing, that's what people always point to. Because not long after those rumors started, Mark Anthony and Jennifer Lopez ended up divorcing. And instead of everything falling apart publicly, Jada and Will came out with that whole "we can do whatever we want" statement, not calling it an open marriage. No, they called it a grown relationship. And people were like, okay, but what does that even mean? Because it sounded like a rebrand, not an explanation. Even Will himself tried to explain it later, saying they give each other freedom, that they go off, find their happiness, and then come back together. But let's be real for a second. Most people watching that weren't thinking, wow, that's healthy. They were thinking, this man looks tired. Because every time Jada talks about these things, she looks comfortable. She laughs. She explains. She owns it. And Will, he looks like he's trying to hold it together. That moment at the red table when she called her relationship with August Alsina an entanglement, that wasn't just awkward. That was painful to watch. And what made it worse is that she didn't just quietly admit it. She sat there and explained it in front of him. Said she just wanted to feel good. Said it had been a long time since she felt that way. And you could literally see Will processing it in real time, trying to stay composed while the whole world watched. And Jaguar is basically saying, this isn't just a one-time situation. This is a pattern. A pattern where Jada prioritizes her own happiness no matter what it does to Will, and where Will just stays. No matter how uncomfortable it looks, no matter how public it gets. And that's the question that keeps coming up. Why does he stay? Because this isn't some regular guy. This is Will Smith, one of the biggest stars in the world, respected, successful, loved by millions. And yet, in this relationship, he often comes across like someone who's constantly trying to prove he's enough. And when you really sit with that, it hits different. Because from the outside, it looks like power, fame, success. But inside that marriage, it feels like something way more complicated, something people are only just starting to fully see. And this is where things start getting even more uncomfortable, because once you peel back that first layer, you realize this whole situation didn't just happen overnight. It's been building for years, quietly, publicly, and somehow both at the same time. Because think about it, every time Jada Pinkett Smith talks about her relationship, she always frames it around her truth, her happiness, her healing. And on paper, that sounds empowering. But when you actually watch how it plays out, especially with Will Smith sitting right there, it starts to feel one-sided. Like, remember when Will went on interviews and basically said, it's impossible to make someone happy? That line didn't just come from nowhere. That came from experience. That came from realizing that no matter what he does, he can't fill whatever space Jada is trying to fill inside herself. And she's even admitted that she's talked about having addictive tendencies, jumping from one thing to another just to feel something, whether it was attention, validation, or just that rush of being desired. She openly said she was chasing that feeling. And when you hear that, you start to understand why the relationship looks the way it does now. Because if someone is constantly chasing something external to feel complete, then no partner, not even someone like Will, is ever going to be enough. And that's where the whole entanglement situation with August Alsina really changed everything. Not because it happened, but because of how it was handled. Because instead of dealing with it privately, it became content. It became a conversation. It became something they sat down and unpacked in front of the world like it was just another episode. And the way Jada described it, she didn't sound guilty. She sounded justified. Like she was explaining a phase she needed to go through. And Will, again, sat there, nodding, trying to keep the peace, even joking through it at times, but you could see it in his eyes. That moment stuck with him. Now, Jaguar Wright takes that and pushes it even further. She's saying that this dynamic didn't just affect Will, it affected the entire household. She brought up that story about their daughter writing a letter to Tupac, asking him to come back so her mom could be happy. And when you hear that, it's like, wait, what? Because kids pick up on things adults think they're hiding. And if a child is feeling like their mother can't be happy with their father, that says a lot about what's being felt inside that house. And then there's this other layer that people don't talk about enough, how much of their private life has been made public, not accidentally, but intentionally. Conversations about their marriage, their struggles, their past relationships, even deeply personal topics, all of it has been shared on camera, discussed openly, analyzed by millions. And again, Jada seems completely comfortable with that level of exposure, but Will, he's always looked like he's participating, not leading it. There were even moments where he pushed back, like that clip where she just started filming him at home without asking. And he was like, don't just start rolling. That wasn't just a random comment. That felt like frustration slipping out. Like he was tired of being turned into content without having a say. And yet, despite all of this, he stays. That's the part people can't wrap their heads around. Because from the outside, it looks like he's sacrificing his dignity, his peace, even his image, just to keep this relationship intact. And some people say it's love. Some say it's loyalty. Others say it's deeper than that. Like maybe he's invested so much into this marriage, into this idea of family, that walking away feels impossible. And then there's the Hollywood factor. Because let's be honest, relationships at that level aren't just personal. They're also business, reputation, legacy. Walking away from a marriage like that isn't just about emotions. It's about everything that comes with it. But still, when you watch those clips, when you see how often Will looks like he's trying to hold things together while Jada is redefining what the relationship means in real time, it makes you wonder if this is really working for both of them or just one of them. And Jaguar's whole point is basically this, that what people are seeing now isn't new, it's just finally being seen clearly. That the dynamic has always been there, but now it's out in the open and people can't ignore it anymore. And the craziest part, even after everything that's come out, everything that's been said, they still don't fully define what the relationship actually is. It's not open, it's not traditional, it's not separated, but it's also not what most people would call stable either. It's something in between, something constantly shifting. And honestly, that's what keeps people watching, questioning, and talking, because nobody can fully figure it out, not even them sometimes. And that's exactly where everything starts to feel heavy. Because at some point, all the explanations, all the rebranding of the relationship, all the we're healing talk, it stops sounding deep and it starts sounding like something that's just been stretched for too long. Because look at Will Smith now compared to how he used to be. This is a man who built his entire image on confidence, charm, being in control of every room he walked into. And then over the years, especially with all these public conversations about his marriage, that image slowly started shifting. Not overnight, but little by little, people started noticing the sadness, the forced smiles, the way he laughs things off even when it clearly hits deeper. And that moment at the Oscars, a lot of people don't even see that as a standalone incident anymore. They see it as everything building up and finally spilling over in 1 second. Because when you're constantly in a situation where you feel like you're not enough, where you're being compared to someone from decades ago like Tupac Shakur, where your partner openly talks about finding happiness outside of you, that pressure doesn't just disappear. It sits there. And the thing is, Will himself has said it. He literally said that you can't make someone happy, that they have to find it on their own. And that sounds like wisdom, but it also sounds like someone who tried and eventually gave up trying. Now, when it comes to Jada Pinkett Smith, she's been very consistent about one thing. She is going to choose herself. Every time, whether it's her happiness, her healing, her truth, whatever word she wants to use, it always comes back to that. And in her mind, that's not wrong, but relationships aren't just about one person choosing themselves over and over again. At some point, there has to be balance. And that's what people feel is missing here. Because even the way she talks about the marriage now, it's like she's constantly redefining it. One day it's not open. The next day it's transparent. Then it's we give each other freedom. Then it's we were separated. Then it's we never really separated. And people are just sitting there like, so what is it actually? And maybe the truth is, it's whatever it needs to be at that moment to keep things from completely falling apart. And that brings it back to the main question. Everyone keeps asking, why does Will stay? Because at this point, it doesn't look like confusion. It looks like a choice, a conscious decision to remain in something that most people would have walked away from a long time ago. Some people say it's love, that he genuinely loves Jada in a way that goes beyond all of this. Others say it's deeper, like he's tied to the idea of family, to the history they built, to the image they created together over decades. And then there are people who think it's something else entirely, that he's just used to it now, that this has become normal for him. And honestly, it could be a mix of all three. Because relationships like this, especially at that level, aren't simple. They're layered with emotions, history, business, public image, personal identity. Everything gets mixed together. And untangling that isn't as easy as just saying leave. But here's the uncomfortable part. Just because something is complicated doesn't mean it's healthy. And that's what people are finally starting to see. Not just the drama, not just the headlines, but the pattern. The way things keep repeating, the way every few years another story comes out, another conversation happens, another moment goes viral, and it always circles back to the same dynamic. Jada searching, Will holding on. And Jaguar Wright, whether people agree with her or not, basically just forced everyone to look at that dynamic without the filters, without the PR, without the polished explanations, without the we're evolving narrative, just raw. So will things ever get better for Will? That depends on what better even means for him. Because from the outside, better looks like peace, stability, respect. But from his perspective, maybe better is just staying, keeping the family intact, maintaining what they've built, even if it's not perfect. Or maybe one day he reaches a point where he realizes that love shouldn't feel like endurance. And until that moment comes, if it ever does, this story is just going to keep going in circles. Same names, same conversations, same questions, just louder every time.